The mahogany table in the boardroom was so highly polished, I could see my own exhausted reflection staring back at me. I looked 10 years older than 32. 5 years of sleeping on a miserable canvas cot in a drafty roasting facility will do that to a man. It's just business, Tommy. You have to look at the macro perspective, Richard said, leaning back in his ergonomic leather chair. His voice was smooth, practiced, and dripping with fake empathy. It was the exact same tone he used to charm venture capitalists and regional distributors. Today, he was using it to slit my throat. He slid a thick manila folder across the table. Next to him sat a corporate lawyer whose custom-tailored suit probably cost more than the first commercial espresso machine I ever bought. "What is this, Richard?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously quiet. My hands, calloused and permanently stained with the faint, sweet smell of roasted coffee beans, rested flat on the table. "It's a buyout execution," the lawyer answered before Richard could. "Under Clause 4B of your original operating agreement, the majority shareholder holds the right to force a buyout of the minority partner in the event of an imminent corporate acquisition. Mr. Vance has exercised that right." I stared at the paperwork. We built Apex Roasters together, at least that's what the business card said. But anyone who actually stepped foot inside the warehouse knew the truth. I was the one who spent 18 months obsessively perfecting our proprietary cold brew extraction method. I was the one who negotiated with the Colombian farmers at 3 in the morning. I was the one who fixed the broken bottling line with duct tape and sheer willpower when we were too broke to call a mechanic. Richard? Richard wore nice suits and played golf with investors. He was the face of the company. I was the heart, the lungs, and the calloused hands. "You're forcing me out?" I looked up, locking eyes with the man who was supposed to be my best friend. "We are 2 weeks away from closing the $5 million acquisition deal with Omni Beverage." 2 weeks, Richard." Richard gave a small, helpless shrug that made my blood boil. "The Omni executives want streamlined leadership, Tommy. They don't want a garage tinkerer on the board of directors. They want a corporate strategist, and frankly, your equity is dragging down my valuation. I own 49% of this company," I stated, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Not anymore," the lawyer said, tapping a manicured finger on the document. "Mr. Vance secured a bridge loan and artificially diluted your shares through a shell company maneuver authorized by the board, which consists of him and his father-in-law. This document offers you a severance package of $100,000 for your remaining equity. It's entirely legal, Mr. Miller. Aggressive, yes, but legal. $100,000 for a company about to sell for $5 million. He was stealing 4 years of my life and over $2 million that rightfully belonged to me, all thanks to a hidden clause we signed when we were just 2 kids drinking beers in a garage." "Tommy, take the money," Richard said softly, leaning forward. "You can go start a nice little neighborhood cafe. Leave the big leagues to me. If you fight this in court, I'll bury you in legal fees until you're bankrupt. You know I have the capital to do it." He was right. A lawsuit would take years, and Omni Beverage would walk away from the deal entirely if there was pending litigation. Richard had calculated this perfectly. He had trapped me in a legal corner where my only options were to surrender or mutually destroy the company I loved. I looked at the pen resting on top of the contract. I looked at Richard's face, so smug, so confident in his absolute victory. He thought he was the smartest man in the room. He thought because I wore work boots and flannel, I didn't understand how the world really worked. A strange, icy calm washed over me. The anger that had been threatening to explode suddenly condensed into something sharp, cold, and highly focused. "Okay," I said quietly. Richard blinked, clearly surprised. "Okay?" "I'll sign," I said, picking up the heavy metal pen. I didn't hesitate. I didn't let my hand shake. I signed my name on the dotted line, officially severing myself from Apex Roasters and handing my life's work over to a thief. Richard let out a breath he had been holding and smiled, a wide, victorious grin. "Smart choice, buddy. Really. It's for the best." "Yeah," I replied, standing up and buttoning my jacket. "It really is." I walked out of the glass-walled boardroom without looking back. What Richard didn't know, what that expensive lawyer had failed to find in their ruthless corporate due diligence, was a tiny, crucial detail from 3 years ago. When we were broke, desperate, and registering the company's intellectual property, Richard's credit cards had all bounced. So I paid the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office filing fees with my own personal debit card. And because I didn't know any better at the time, I didn't register the Apex Roasters name. the logo, or our secret extraction patent under the corporation. I registered them under my own name. Richard just stole a $5 million company, but he was about to find out that he didn't own the product. The $100,000 check sat on my scratched kitchen table, right next to a lukewarm cup of black coffee. It was a perfectly printed piece of corporate extortion. Most people would have stared at it and cried. I stared at it and smiled. I didn't cash it. Cashing it meant I legally accepted the settlement. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed the only man who hated corporate bullies more than I did, Marcus, a ruthless intellectual property lawyer who took no prisoners. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Marcus's cramped office. I slid a faded manila envelope across his desk. It didn't look like much. Just a collection of crumpled receipts, printed emails, and official certificates from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, all dated 3 years ago. Marcus adjusted his glasses. For 10 minutes, the only sound in the room was the ticking of a wall clock. I watched his eyes scan the fine print. Slowly, a predatory grin spread across his face. "Tommy," Marcus said, his voice hushed with pure professional joy. "Tell me you didn't." Richard's credit cards were maxed out, I explained, keeping my voice deadpan. The corporate account was overdrawn. We needed the trademark filed before we pitched to our first regional distributor, so I put the $275 filing fee on my personal visa. I filled out the online forms myself. I put my name as the registrant, not Apex Roasters LLC. Me, Thomas Miller. I did the exact same thing for the cold brew extraction patent 6 months later. Marcus leaned back, tossing the papers onto his desk like a winning royal flush. "Richard just forced you out of the LLC. He legally owns the LLC, but the LLC doesn't own the name Apex Roasters. The LLC doesn't own the logo, and the LLC definitely doesn't own the proprietary extraction method that Omni Beverage is paying $5 million for. So, what exactly is Omni buying from Richard next Friday?" I asked. Marcus laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "They are buying a warehouse lease, some used roasting machines, and a pile of useless office furniture. He's selling them an empty box. You hold the contents. Can we stop the sale?" "Stop it?" Marcus's eyes gleamed. "Tommy, we aren't going to stop it. We are going to hijack it, but we need to time this perfectly." Over the next 10 days, I lived a ghost's life. Meanwhile, Richard was on a public victory lap. I watched his LinkedIn updates with morbid fascination. He posted photos of himself in tailored suits, standing in front of my roasters, typing long, self-congratulatory essays about the relentless grind of a solo founder and building an empire. He was high on his own arrogance, completely blind to the tripwire wrapped tightly around his ankle. 3 days before the acquisition was finalized, Marcus made a discreet phone call to the lead acquisitions director at Omni Beverage, Sarah Jenkins. He didn't threaten them. He just offered a friendly, off-the-record clarification regarding intellectual property. They met us in a private booth at a high-end steakhouse downtown. Sarah came with Omni's head of legal. They looked extremely annoyed, probably expecting a disgruntled ex-employee begging for a handout. I didn't say a word. I just let Marcus slide a sleek black binder across the table. "Ms. Jenkins," Marcus said smoothly, "we understand Omni is finalizing a $5 million acquisition of Apex Roasters this Friday. As a courtesy, we felt obligated to inform you that you are negotiating with the wrong man." Sarah frowned, opening the binder. As she read the official USPTO certificates, proving my sole ownership of the brand and the patents, all the color drained from her face. Omni's lawyer literally choked on his drink. "If you sign that contract with Richard Vance," Marcus whispered, leaning in, "my client will file an immediate injunction. You will pay $5 million for a brand you cannot legally use, and a coffee recipe you cannot legally brew." Sarah looked up from the documents. The annoyance was completely gone, replaced by the cold, calculating stare of a corporate shark who realized she had almost stepped into a massive trap. She looked straight at me. "What do you want, Mr. Miller?" she asked. I leaned forward, resting my calloused hands on the white tablecloth. "I want to sell you a coffee company, but we are going to do it my way." Friday morning arrived with blinding sunlight. The Omni Beverage headquarters occupied the top floors of a sleek glass skyscraper. From the 50th floor boardroom, the city looked like a concrete chessboard. Richard was already there, sitting at the head of a massive mahogany table. Flanked by two junior corporate lawyers, he wore a custom-tailored charcoal suit and a smile of absolute certainty. He looked like a man who had already spent his first million. When the heavy oak doors swung open and Marcus and I stepped into the room, Richard didn't even look angry. He looked pityingly amused. "Tommy," Richard sighed, shaking his head with a theatrical display of disappointment. "This is a closed acquisition. You signing that severance agreement doesn't buy you a ticket to the victory party. Please, don't embarrass yourself." I didn't leave. I walked across the plush carpet and took a seat directly across from him. Marcus sat next to me, placing his slim leather briefcase on the table with a deliberate thud. "We aren't here for your party, Richard," Marcus said cheerfully. "We're here for the closing." Before Richard could instruct his lawyers to have us removed, Sarah Jenkins, Omni's lead acquisitions director, walked in. She carried a thick stack of freshly bound documents and set them at the center of the table. She wasn't smiling. Richard stood up, buttoning his jacket with practiced elegance. "Sarah, I apologize for the interruption. My former partner is having trouble letting go. If we could just get these papers signed, my team will have him escorted out." He reached into his breast pocket, pulling out a heavy, gold-plated Mont Blanc pen. He uncapped it, ready to sign away my life's work. "Put the pen away, Mr. Vance," Sarah said. Her tone was so sharp it practically echoed. "We are not signing those contracts." Richard froze. The smug smile cracked, revealing a flicker of genuine panic. I'm sorry? We agreed on the terms. The valuation is locked." Our board approved the acquisition of the Apex Roasters brand and its proprietary extraction technology, Sarah corrected him coldly. "However, our legal department discovered a fatal flaw in your corporate structure. Your LLC does not own the trademark to the name, it does not own the logo, and it certainly does not hold the patent for the cold brew extraction method." Richard blinked. He looked at his lawyers. His lawyers looked at each other, their faces suddenly pale. "What are you talking about?" Richard stammered, his smooth cadence shattering. "Of course we own it. We're Apex Roasters, LLC." "You own a piece of paper that says LLC," Marcus interjected, sliding a terrifying document across the table. "But you don't own the intellectual property. My client does. He registered everything personally 3 years ago. You hold a warehouse lease and rusting machinery. That's it." Richard stared at the United States Patent and Trademark Office certificates. His eyes darted across the pages, searching for a loophole. There was nothing, just my name, Thomas Miller, printed in stark black ink. "This is a clerical error," Richard gasped, his breathing shallow. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "He was bought out. You can't do this." "Actually, I can," I finally spoke, leaning back. "You forced a buyout of the LLC, Richard. I signed away my equity, but the IP was never part of the company. It belonged to me. And as of this morning, I am officially issuing Apex Roasters LLC a cease and desist order. You are legally forbidden from using my name or my recipe." The silence in the room was absolute. Richard was physically shrinking into his expensive suit. "Sarah," Richard pleaded, turning back to the acquisitions director, "we can fix this. We can rebrand. Just give me a week to restructure." "Omni Beverage doesn't buy distribution networks. We buy brands," Sarah said. She slid the thick stack of contracts toward me. "And we already bought this one. We finalized the acquisition of the Apex IP portfolio with Mr. Miller an hour ago for the full $5 million. Richard looked like he had been struck by lightning. "You bought it from him?" "Yes," I said. "And the best part, Richard, because you diluted my shares with a bridge loan to force me out, you now hold 100% of Apex Roasters LLC." I paused, letting the reality crash over him. "Which means you are solely responsible for repaying that massive high-interest loan. You own an empty shell company with no brand, no product, and a mountain of debt. You tried to bury me to get the whole pie. Now you get to choke on the empty plate." Richard slumped back into his chair, drained of blood. His hands were shaking so violently he had to hide them under the table. The brilliant corporate strategist had just outsmarted himself into absolute bankruptcy. I stood up, buttoning my jacket. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt incredibly, wonderfully light. "Keep the severance check, Richard," I said softly. "It looks like you're going to need it." I walked out of the glass boardroom, the $5 million contract safely secured in Marcus's briefcase. The coffee business was ruthless, but karma? Karma was the most satisfying brew of all. Thank you so much for watching to the very end. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We are working incredibly hard to reach our very first 1,000 subscribers, and every single sub truly means the world to us. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.